Hey booktubers. Well, I just finished Huckleberry Finn and I'm trying to think how in the world do you give thoughts about a classic book like that. You know, so much has been written about it. Probably most people know what it's about in general. My thoughts were that I liked the book. It's written in Huck Finn's voice, and that, of course, makes it a little bit difficult to read in today's modern world. But so it has that southern, I believe that they're from Missouri, so that southern voice of a young child. I believe he's 12, and fairly uneducated. So this is the second book in, I guess you could say, the Tom Sawyer Huck Finn series. The first one is The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. And if you decide to read Huck Finn, I recommend that you read Tom Sawyer first, because it introduces Huck and kind of sets the stage as to what's going on in The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. I will, let's say, I want to warn people that, of course, this book has the N-word in it a lot. And for today's society in America, that word is obviously not a good word to use. No, it never was, but so I just want to warn people that that word is there. And if you're a younger viewer, I don't see any reason why younger people shouldn't read the book. I'm not sure they would get as much out of it, because it is difficult to understand the language, because it's written, like I say, coming from first person Huck Finn. So, and it was purposely written that way so that people would understand how kids thought in that part of the South at that time. So in that regard, it's very, very interesting. But I guess just very, very briefly, we have Huckleberry Finn, who is a fairly uneducated 12-year-old boy. His father has basically abandoned him. However, his father shows up here and there, I believe in Tom Sawyer and also in Huck Finn. And his dad is a drunk and abuses him to some degree, and things like that. It's not a good situation, and Huck basically wants to get away from him, and he does. So, and of course, he does it in a very adventurous manner, and sets up this whole. Well, you'll have to read it. I don't want to give that away, how he gets away from his dad, but and then of course he decides to go down the river on a raft, and he meets up with a black slave named Jim, and it's funny because the N-word is used a lot, but there are certain parts of the book where, even though Huck Finn is using the word, it's almost endearing, because Jim becomes his best friend and his, I think, substitute father. And it's really precious the way the two of them get along. And of course, Jim is great through the whole thing. He's just a really, really wonderful person, and you get to see that towards the end of the book, where, and I'll just give this away, he gives up his so-called freedom to save one of the boys. And it's just amazing. It's almost tearful for me because of the way he was treated throughout the book as a black slave, and yet his heart was really for these kids. And so, in any way, you know, it's a recommended read. I wrote a couple notes here, so I'm just going to look at them because there's so much that goes on in this book. A lot of adventure. Huckleberry Finn is not a good person. He lies a lot. He steals. But you've got to remember that he was a country boy that his father was in and out, so he pretty much was kind of on his own. There's a lot of folklore in it and superstition, more so in Tom Sawyer than in Huck Finn. But if you read Tom Sawyer, you'll see where the superstition comes in, and it's quite comical. I felt that the last adventure was not as good, but you know, there's my cat. Not as good, but he had to wrap up the book, and I can't explain what happens because I wanted to surprise you at the last adventure. But it appears that Huck is a little more mature when he's around adults and thinks in a more common sense way. When he gets around other kids his age, he isn't so. He gives in to them, and he gives in to their ideas, and that surprised me quite a bit, that he didn't kind of stick up for himself when he was around kids of his own age. I don't know, he possibly felt a little unworthy, or that's not the right word, but I think you guys understand what I mean when he's around his peers. He's Huck Finn is very gullible. He meets up at one point with two characters, him and Jim both, that eventually they're called the King and the Duke. And these guys they're rascals. They're basically, what was the word I used here that I thought was pretty good? Hustlers, in essence. And the way they make money is to lie to people and to make them think that the Duke and the King are something that they are not. And Huck Finn kind of gets involved in all this, and you can see where he struggles morally with what they're doing, even though Huck Finn himself is not really a highly moral person. He still struggles with the kinds of things that they're doing, and ultimately he wants to get away from them, and does a couple times, gets trapped back in, and then eventually does get out. Let's see what else I got here. I think that's about it. So in essence, the book ends very, very well. It's a happy ending to it. The edition that I read was the Easton Press edition, which is a leatherback edition. Look at it's just beautifully illustrated. That's all embossed there, and of course it has the gold edging and the bookmark. And I think I showed this to you before, but there's illustrations in the book. Each chapter beginning has an illustration like that, and then there are several full page illustrations in it too. So that adds to the story, and I just thought it was really neat. The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, or I'm sorry, the Adventures of Tom Sawyer was also an Easton Press edition. And so there's an introduction at the beginning of this. It's like 50 pages, and I skipped the introduction because you really should. If you get a classic and there's an introduction, you need to read the book first and then go back and read the introduction, because it was rather interesting. I didn't read the whole thing. I was just kind of skimming through it, and it talked about how Mark Twain wrote the book, and some things that they found in his notes on how he actually conceived of all the adventures and what Huckleberry Finn was going to be, and how he decided to make it in first person. So very interesting. So I definitely recommend Huckleberry Finn, with the warning that it does use the N-word a lot. So that's it. Have a good day. See you.